plan to have two speakers today, Mr. Rajpai and Mr. Shravan Goli. Mr. Rajpai couldn't join us today. He had a death in the family back in India, and he just couldn't join today. So he would be joining in another couple of weeks. But we are very fortunate to have Mr. Shravan Goli, who's Chief Product Officer at Coursera, join us here in the session today as a distinguished speaker. Shravan, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Hi, folks. Good morning. Happy Mother's Day.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly introduce you, Shravan, and then I would love for you to chat a little bit about your journey, because in this session we have over 30 kids who are really motivated, who are they're all high schoolers, but they are fairly mature, and they have tremendous commitment to the cause of Seva, as well as the desire to explore a lot of professional opportunities. It's a fairly high caliber of high school students, and they would love to hear a little bit about your journey. So my request is, before you get into your talk, if you could talk a little bit about yourself and journey that you have taken, because that's one of the things that they can learn from. It's an example that could be useful for a number of kids on the call. So as I mentioned, Mr. Shravan Goli is a Chief Product Officer at Coursera. Coursera is probably the largest platform for online learning. Am I correct, Shravanji?
We'll take the credit for that.
And before that, Shravan was at Dice.com, senior leader there, which is a very important technology job portal platform. So he brings a very interesting background. So he's an engineer by training, but he's been in the tech industry for a very, very long time as a senior leader. And what he has been, what he brings to this conversation is his journey that he has gone through in different parts of the tech industry, both as an on the employer side, as well as now on the training side. So really, really useful to have his perspective. So without further ado, I'm gonna have Shravan come on and talk about his background, and then he's got a really wonderful set of slides to walk you through, in this time of crisis, what could you all as high school students do to learn from this from online opportunities? How do you make the best of those opportunities? And then I'll do a fireside chat with Shravan to talk about some of those topics that he brings up, and then we'll open it up to Q&A for all of you. And Dipali, you may want to bring Shravan's video to feature on the main screen here, because I see right now it's only showing up your screen on the main screen.
I think if you stop sharing, I can share my screen as well.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So without further ado, Shravan.
Oh, thank you. So totally appreciate the welcome, Anurag. You're too kind. I think when you reached out to me just a few days ago, it was interesting. Obviously, just kind of trying to figure out how we kind of make time and all that. But then you realize, like, you're not going anywhere, right? You're sitting at home and you're not doing anything better in life. But what was exciting for me was the opportunity to speak to really aspiring, up and coming high school students. That's what you said. So that's always great. Just, on the personal front, I have a 10th grader and a 7th grader at home. So it's always, obviously they don't listen to me. So at least I'm like looking for ways or avenues to kind of share whatever 2 cents I can. So I think I appreciate the opportunity, all of you kids joining today, this morning, to just kind of listen in and learn, whatever I can help you guys with, I'm happy to, and kind of at least tell you the story, what's going on in the world as the way Coursera sees it, and kind of how we can potentially help millions of people around the world as we go through this crisis and come to the other end of the crisis at some level. So thank you. So what I would do is just going to give you a little bit of a background. But before I do that, I did compel my kids to sign up somewhere. So let me just go check on them quickly and say, at least I said, okay.
That's good. That's wonderful. That's a great job.
That's fine, but at least maybe listen to me because others are listening today at least.
By the way, I don't know if any of you kids have your moms listening in on the conversation to these sessions. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms who are on the call as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Hope you did something nice for the mom also. The mom deserves it. So let me just kind of get on with it a little bit. I know we got a little bit of time to kind of go through the slides. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the slides necessarily. I think I would be much more interested in kind of hearing your questions as well. Yeah. But to Anurag's point, I think I've been at Coursera for about 2 years, but the perspective I'm bringing is this idea around, I've spent a lot of time in education learning with dictionary.com, as well as a lot of time at DICE, just connecting education to employment and employers with people who are looking to employ those people, right? And so I've spent for better part of the last 10 plus years, one way or the other, in terms of education and jobs and how learning kind of leads to economic outcomes. And so Coursera is actually something I think we've invested a lot of time and energy in, just kind of mapping what do you need to learn to get ready for the world that's out there from a jobs perspective. So we do spend a lot of time on that, and we do have a lot of our users, almost, I would say today now it's about 75% or more of the users are people who are in the professional domain. They're out there in the world, they're working, or they're trying to find a better job, or they're trying to get a promotion. And then we're also working with companies that are that have been working with us to kind of help transform their own employees. And so we've also been learning from that perspective in terms of what skills, what these companies are looking to develop in their own employee base. And then we have all these other 25% of our learners, they're all students. Actually, we've seen a real massive flood of students in the last 2 months. And so we've also kind of generated some additional insights that I would love to share. So I'm going to share my screen quickly here and walk you through a little bit of the presentation. Anything else, Anurag, you want me to cover before I get on? You're mute, but you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. It happens more often than you realize. I think that's great preamble, Shravan. I think the thing that you mentioned that actually caught my attention was over the last two and a half, 3 months, you've seen a greater influx of students actually coming on. And that's really important. So in fact, we actually came up with the theme of this, your session, without actually hearing that perspective from you. So, clearly we are in simpatico here. And I think, for the students who are on the call, this actually speaks to the relevance of online platform in these times. And one other thing I would say, and I'm hoping that you're going to talk about this, Shravan, is as we look at the other end of this crisis, education models are going to change. I mean, that's part of the reason why Coursera was founded, actually, right? So I think this is the time where the vision that Coursera had is actually becoming a lot more relevant, even more relevant than it was before. In the past, it was more about just upskilling for the professionals. They are doing other things, but they want to actually add some skills on the side. But this may become a predominant way of learning going forward. And the workplace is changing quite a bit as well. And a lot of employers don't require degrees anymore. So I'm really looking forward to listening to this, your comments. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So let me just kind of get started with this here. So I wanted to kind of first paint the picture on how COVID has changed the higher education fundamentally, to Anurag's point, forever, in my view. And it's going to take time, but it's a massive disruption. So on March 4th, UNESCO actually declared a global crisis that was occurring across the world in terms of higher education, how disruptive it has been. And it's something that nobody has ever seen before. And so for context, on March 4th, when they made this statement there were about 364 million students that were affected across the world, meaning their schools were shut down and they were starting to, the countries were getting in shutdown mode. So the students all of a sudden found themselves at home. So this was on March 4th. A week later, it was 394 million. A week later, it was 872 million. And a week later, it was 1.6 billion students. So, and across 191 countries. And so that's what's actually, I think, the world has faced, and which meant that every institution, every university in the world had to even high schools, every level of educational institutions had to start figuring out overnight, how do we respond to this crisis and how do we enable continuity of education for students? That was the number one big stress point for these institutional leaders. And so they obviously jumped on online in a crisis mode without a lot of capabilities. But with that, what we have seen also from a Coursera standpoint, we've seen a flood of students, flood of users coming to Coursera. What you see here is a chart. While this whole disruption was going on in the physical educational space, I think the online education really became the go-to for anybody who wanted to, was worried about, but also who wanted to continue their education journey, right? And so what you see here is a chart that literally, as the shutdowns were happening through March and into April, you see this, it's not even exponential. This is like a vertical curve of enrollments that we've seen on our site. And especially we've also seen enrollments from new users to Coursera were up almost 20 times. And this was also happening across the world, to map the fact that 191 countries were going into shutdown mode. We were looking at like, hey, is this regional, local? How is this happening? So we looked at across the board. You could see US, South Asia, Latin America, UK, Western Europe, Middle East, every country. It wasn't just China, Taiwan, but every country and every region was facing the same issues. And we saw significant similar trends and spikes. And they were also consuming, and it was typically, when I look at these charts, normally, like in February and January, business, data science, and computer science were the three domains that people were looking at, generally speaking, learning wise. And even those curves were never like this straight line vertical, but those were the three top domains. Now, what you see here, what has actually happened, as lots of students, lots of different broad sectors of the population started going online learning, they brought in with their preferences for all kinds of skills. And one of the top, I think, has been the personal development and life sciences. Personal development, mental wellness, personal health, and then life sciences, especially in the public health domain, like COVID kind of crisis, coronavirus. People have forgotten, like, I think in general, obviously, in our communities, especially, we're so much more tuned to technology, especially living in Silicon Valley. But I think what you see here is the idea around public health and how unprepared we were from a public health perspective, both knowledge, people, capabilities, and technology, all of that coming together. And so we saw that. And then also soft skills, continue to see the soft skills around arts and humanities, and high school level stuff, especially math and logic, language learning, science and engineering. A lot of these courses were also starting to see big pickup. And that's what we've seen also. The Science of Wellbeing was the highest enrolled course in March on Coursera. And this is taught by a preeminent Yale professor. I've taken this course, phenomenal course. Part of what a crisis, something like this, which is unprecedented, does to people is a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. And there's huge levels of unemployment right now. And companies have shut down, and you're working remote, schools have shut down, and you're at homes. And so there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty about the future. And we do feel like, learning and education is a real solution. Every time you run into these stress situations, that's your go-to, because that's how you're going to come out on the other side. And so science of well-being was an interesting discovery for us. And then, as I mentioned, public health, science matters. This was a course Imperial College London put together in 2 weeks, and they launched it on Coursera, and this became the second most popular course. So there's appetite for knowledge, appetite for information. The key thing for me, I talk about always, is having that curiosity, having that appetite for learning and knowledge is what is going to make a difference in, difference between people who are going to progress forward in situations like this, but versus people who are going to regress, are the ones that will take on the challenge and develop curiosity and kind of how you continue your learning journey and actually accelerate that learning journey, in fact. So what we tried to do was, as we realized all these universities were getting shut down across the world, we said, well, we have this catalog. We have a catalog of over 4,000 courses. And we said, well, why can't we make this catalog available for free to every university in the world? And if we can do that, then at least we're going to help enable a continuity of education. Because not many teachers, all of a sudden, they're not going to be able to create their content online. All of a sudden, they can't teach online. And when we look at our catalog of courses, it maps really well to a lot of the subjects and the content that gets taught on these campuses. And so we launched Coursera for Campus Coronavirus Initiative, which essentially enabled free access to catalog to every university to offer it to their students and deliver it fully online. And so within these numbers are a little outdated already. This was a slide a couple of weeks ago. We have over 7,000 unique institutions around the world that have signed up for this. And over 500,000 students have enrolled, and they have actually spent almost 5 million hours of learning. It's fascinating for us. Like, it takes years and ages. Like, in February, we had this product all along. In February, there were 50 universities on this product. And in April, we're seeing 7,000 universities. So there's a huge appetite. And it's a huge opportunity from a Coursera standpoint. To Anurag's point earlier, he talked about, what was the origin of Coursera? Coursera was started by Daphne Koller and Andrew Ng, 2 Stanford professors, actually. So Anurag's your alum, and Andrew still teaches at Stanford. And they started with a vision of making high quality content for access to, in a very affordable way, to anybody in the world. And that's what they did. They started with taking their course that they were teaching on campus, and they said, hey, what if we put this online? This was in 2012. And what if we just kind of let anybody can join that course online? They thought maybe a few thousand students might join, and they had 100,000 students in the first class. And that sparked them the vision for Coursera. And today, I think, we're so humbled and honored and fortunate to feel like we've been in the right place to help the world. And then we also said, well, we want to make it easy. Like, we got this 4,000 courses. We can't just throw it in front of these universities and say, go figure it out. And so what my team did, data science team, this is, again, something to think about, like how data is powering the innovation in the world. The data science team just went in and has said, let's look at all the course catalogs across 2,000 institutions in this country. And then we did that. And then we listed all the courses on our catalog, and we mapped all the courses that are being taught on these campuses and said, what maps to what? And, we kind of put some relevant score here. But for example, you see the systems analysis and design course, CS330, typical on-campus course name, it maps to introductions to systems engineering, right? And so we just did about 2.6 million courses like that. And so that's sort of, one wave of things. Now let's look at the impact of COVID in terms of jobs and skills for a second. So when you look at jobs and skills, fundamentally, there are 2 axes here you'll see. One is the wages on the y-axis, which goes from low wages to highest wages. And on the x-axis, the risk of automation. So on the left side, imagine that as the lowest risk of automation. And then on the right is the highest risk of automation of jobs. And so when we mapped all of the jobs in the skills that are relevant for what's happening in the world, what you see here is obviously in the top left quadrant, highest job wages with lowest risk of automation. And then on the right side, the bottom right, is the lowest wages with the highest risk of automation. And so when you look at some of these jobs and also look at like the kinds of education these jobs are needed. So when you have no formal education, which is the red bubbles, you generally fall into low wage, high risk of automation. And if you get a high school diploma, that's sort of the next level, but you're still in that bucket more or less. And when you get to post-secondary non-degree, you're starting to get a little bit better, but once you get a college degree, that's when your wage premium increases, your ability and opportunities increase many-fold, and the risk of automation decreases quite a bit. But even there, you have to choose kind of wisely, right? And so now, what did COVID do to this, especially even more? And so we said, well, what are the jobs that are even more vulnerable because of COVID crisis? Kind of tried to kind of change the x-axis a little bit. And so when you look at this, once again, a lot of jobs that are at risk are at the bottom right. Retailers. If most of the consumption behavior is going to move to online and e-commerce, retail stores are going to see devastating closures, and you're probably already seeing in the news. And what happens to people who are retail clerks or sales professionals in those shops and stores? Food services, so nobody knows when this crisis, COVID, is going to really end until there's a vaccine, until there's an ability for all of us to kind of feel safe, to kind of mingle with each other on a consistent basis. We're going to be very guarded in kind of how we approach the things. And so even when restaurants open, even when some of these food establishments are going to open, they cannot be open to 100% capacity. They have to maintain social distance. They have to maintain all these things. So that means there's going to be another layer of unemployment that's going to continue to emerge there, but then also means that a lot of restaurants could see closures. And arts and entertainment, right? Who's going to any live events right now? Movies and things like that. So same thing. So anything that requires a lot of the physical connections and physical interactions are going to face a decent amount of churn. Now, on the other hand, the things that are going to continue, going to do better, obviously technical, information management, education side. Education, believe it or not, like education has gone through a lot of pain over the last 10, 15 years, but in terms of funding and a lot of that stuff, but digital transformation of education is going to revive a lot of universities. Now, with that said, there's also going to be a temporary, disablement, because once again, a lot of this education is also physical, face-to-face in nature. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where it all ends up. So let's see what future jobs will require new skills. So World Economic Forum kind of put together this framework of jobs for tomorrow. And they publish both the hard skills meaning like, data, technology skills, the soft skills like leadership, negotiation, communication. Those are the kinds of things that are called soft skills. And they kind of actually said skills is the new currency. Anurag's point about, do you need a degree or not? But I mean, there's still, on the other hand, I would say still, the college degrees actually still have a wage premium and a recognition. But more importantly, you also need to think about like what skills you're developing as you're pursuing those degree ambitions. And you have to think about both the hard skills and soft skills. But these are some of the jobs that they're saying, will emerge to be growth areas, which will. So you also want to think about like if you're going to continue your education or graduate in the next few years, you want to find yourself in a place where those are the areas where the jobs are seeing the growth. and not getting substituted, right? And so data and AI, engineering and cloud computing, sales, marketing, and content you will still need in certain sectors. Care economy, healthcare overall is also fairly interesting. I think healthcare is going to see a massive transformation as well with a lot of digital, you can see telehealth, teledoc. A lot of those guys are really moving fast and we've seen accelerated growth. And so think of areas where there could be existing industries utilizing technology and data and cloud and other services can be layered in to kind of create innovation, to create opportunity. And those are the areas I think we'll continue to see job growth. So now stepping back, okay, so what do we have on Coursera as a result? Like when we look at that mapping, so we have pretty extensive catalog. I said about 4,000 courses, but largely business, technology, and data, but also healthcare, social sciences, arts and humanities. We've also been working with a lot of companies. So it's not just about universities that are producing content. Google, IBM, Amazon, they were also producing content for Coursera, their courses on Coursera. And that's an interesting trend that we've seen in the last 2 years, especially Google has this Google IT support professional certification, for example. IBM has applied AI professional certification. So if you can blend the traditional theory university education with what the industry is looking for, if you can actually blend those, you will be in a better place, and you will have probably more skills that are relevant for the jobs, even more so. So for example, when we work with a lot of companies, we have over 2,300 companies that are working with Coursera today. When we work with the companies, once again, we are like talking to them about, hey, what are the essential skills that your organization needs as you think about digital transformation? And if you look at what's been powering the innovation, it's cloud, it's data, it's mobile, it's technology, and programming, all of these things over the last 10, 15 years. And most of the companies have, the Silicon Valley view is a little micro view because we live in the tech bubble. So everybody is generally, digital transformation is something they understand and they adapt. But you look at the other 95% of the population of the world, it's not exactly the way that the transformation has happened. A lot of industries, once again, retail, health, all these industries are continuing to undergo the digital transformation. So that's what we work with: banking, financials, aerospace, all these companies. And so what we hear is generally, once again, when we think about digital transformation, it's business, technology, and data skills. And then we say, all right, you could be an engineer inside the company, you could be a data scientist, you could be a product manager, you could be in finance, you could be in marketing, you could be in management inside this company. But every one of these roles requires business, technology, and data skills. And so that's what we did. And so what does it mean from an engineer to learn business skills is going to be different from what a manager needs to learn from a business skills. Same thing goes with technology, same thing goes with data. And so ultimately, as you think about how it's low early stage for a lot of you guys, but as you think about, I want to pursue finance, I want to pursue marketing, I want to pursue data science, I want to pursue leadership management, I want to pursue engineering, you have to think about, like, how do I customize and how do I personalize the learning for those skills that we're talking about going to be in demand, and just kind of create a little bit of a focused approach. Because you are going to get a lot of input from a lot of people. And so I think it's important at least to kind of say, if you directionally, where you're headed, it makes it a lot more focused, your effort personally. And then we just give, we also give them a little bit more detailed maps when we do this, like here are the specific courses and these are the institutions. So if I look at business skills for engineering teams, courses, AI for everyone, like everybody should know about AI, but they could also go deeper on that and go on to learn other things. Anyway, so data science, if you look at introduction to data science in Python, but NLP, machine learning, mathematics for machine learning, and things like that as you kind of progress if you want to pursue a career in data science. Okay, so what have we done beyond sort of these companies and the universities? What we've also engaged is through our Coursera.org site. We've done two main things. I don't have slides for the other one, but we looked at the fact that there are more 30 million people that have filed for unemployment. And so we launched a Coursera for Workforce Recovery Initiative. We just took all of that content that we packaged for our enterprise, our company customers, and provided a free access to any government agency that is helping unemployed professionals. And so the collections that you see here are the ones that we've actually made them available to unemployed professionals so they can actually develop these skills and hopefully gain some sort of employment down the road. Now, we also did for students, and I just kind of picked some examples from high school students, but we put together collections of content for various types of student categories as well. Here's just, this is the URL you can go to. You can go to Coursera.org on our blog post, and you can also find your way to this content from there as well. But we put together a collection, our teams kind of put together collections of content that could be interesting for high school students. And we've also looked at okay, what are some of the skills and content that could be teaching some of those skills that we talked about, the future jobs. And we also made those available as part of these collections of content. Let's see. Now, all of this is interesting, but we've also recognized some of the key trends. And so we continue to innovate our product experiences. We believe fundamentally, remote students is remote education, remote learning is here to stay. So at the end of the day, but physical campuses were going to come back. Students are going to go back to schools, but there's going to be blended learning. I think there's a huge acceptance. There's been a resistance across a lot of institutions around blended learning models for a variety of reasons. Now that they're forced to adapt, I think what is going to actually happen is acceleration of innovation in terms of online learning, which blends with the in-classroom experience and leverage the best of the both mediums. Like when there are lectures, when there are things that you can just watch and learn yourself at your own pace, there's no reason to waste the time in the class and actually help in the time in the class to do exercises, to do group things, other things that could create a collaborative skill development and other soft skill development as well. And as I mentioned, we've made all of our courseware access to any school. It's self-paced and it's high quality. And I think one of the things that we have done is thinking about how do we enable a lot of these unemployed professionals to showcase that they're actually learning. The theory is fine, but they can actually apply. We've invested in what we call as Coursera Labs, which helps you develop hands-on applied learning in browser. So you can actually do any sort of programming, you can do any sort of coding as you take different courses, and that's something that we've done. This is another innovation that we've just launched, which is called Rhyme, which is side-by-side learning that teaches any software tool with any skills that you want to develop. The instructor's video is on the right, and on the left, you're just following the instructions from the instructor. And so it's like side-by-side, look and learn. So these are some of the examples. My whole point here was to kind of get you guys excited about what could be coming and emerging in terms of online learning. So it's not just Zoom videos nonstop. So there's going to be more. And then we also have a blog post. I get asked questions all the time, like, what are the tips for effective online learning? So if you actually go to this blog post, you can read them at length and at detail. But setting yourself on a schedule, finding a buddy, work together, set some goals, get getting those certifications now, getting the hands-on applied learning. So kind of going through a lot of those things could be really, really useful from a time management standpoint. So last thing I wanted to kind of point out, this is something I think is important for anybody who's thinking about the future of learning and how this is going to emerge. Historically, the learning model has been very traditional, linear. If you think about, you go to school, you go through the 18 years, actually 21 years of school. That's kind of what I did. And so we all did. We learn new skills, and then we go find a job, and then that's it. And a lot of times your education learning ends, and you're trying to kind of struggle through the job, and you're going to continue to kind of figure it out. But I think the future of the work and the future of learning are actually converged. And the way we think about that is something that kind of brings it all together as a platform, meaning that it is a continuous journey, and learning, education, employment is a continuing journey. So if you think of this as just as a triangle, but as a cycle, you want to continue to reinvent yourself. So the biggest advice I give to your age kids in general is develop the habits of learning. Getting A grades, A pluses, it's all great. I think that's great. I'm not going to dissuade you from trying to get A's. But the fundamental thing is like having the curiosity, continuing the learning journey, but how can you find your way to continuously develop new skills, figure out what those new skills are, find the avenues to learn, because there are a lot of avenues to learn today. And if you can if you can develop those habits, other things will follow by themselves. So I'll pause here. All right.
Brilliant. That was great, Shravan. I think, you actually, I had high expectations given your background and the platform you represent, but you actually far exceeded what came out of this presentation already, and I hope this conversation actually delves into some of those. So I actually was typing messages in the chat box, kind of alerting students to sort of capture the key things that were coming out. So I'm going to go into some of the questions, but I wanted to actually talk about a few key takeaways already. I think you've really laid out how the future of profession and future of learning are going to merge and how they are changing. In fact, the very first session for this whole series was a very high-level overview of reports that had come out about the changes that were taking place in workplace and how in another decade, 50% of the jobs would be gone. And today you provided a lot more specificity to what those were. I love your visuals. The other thing that I really liked about what you said about was that linear learning is passé. It's no longer the way it's going to be in the future. If you think about it, where did the linear learning come from? K through 12 and college. It actually is an industrial era invention, right? Because they wanted to train these people who would basically work in the factories. So there was a very specific role that each person had to play as a cog in the wheel. Right. But as the future of work changes, this is a knowledge. So that was industrial age, it's the knowledge age. So you really, I liked two things that you said, continuous learning and iterative learning. I think you said cyclical or iterative, but basically at any stage, you got to be ready to learn something new that you don't know. And I think I paraphrase what you said is, if you can learn how to learn, then you're golden. So I think from that point of view, kids who are on the call, this is a very important takeaway. Yeah, extremely important takeaway. Would you agree with that, Shravan?
Absolutely. In fact, actually, millions of others agree with you, because learning how to learn is one of the most popular courses ever on Coursera. So when people come and ask me, it's like I say, go take that class, because it teaches you, so a whole Pomodoro technique and all that stuff, right? So it just kind of brings you, a lot of us struggle with just trying to kind of maintain a schedule, trying to motivate ourselves, to kind of create that focus, especially in the world where you're continuously online, you've got a lot of things coming at you. So now it's going to get even harder.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that Coursera has done very well is it has curated these. So there are hundreds of thousands, millions is what I heard, of courses, which is amazing, because then if it's going to be non-linear learning, it's going to be iterative learning, it's going to be continuous learning, then you want all of these available to you at any time, because you don't know what time you'll need them.
That's right.
But you also curated them. So I really like the last part where you actually had a curated portion for high school kids. Yeah. So I'm going to start my question from there. But before I do that, your kids are on the call as well, right? And you said something about grades. Were they listening in?
They were going to be downstairs. I think they are, but I don't know if they're going to open their mouths.
So I actually agree with that, because I think grades are important. When you get into good colleges and so on, you do need good grades, because it's also a reflection of how well you learn the material, but that's not the only indicator of how well you learn the material. Yeah. So I think that's the point you were making. Yeah. But let me start with that last portion about high school section that you have, the curated portion you have. How many courses are on there in that high school section?
Yeah, so I have to go back and check, but basically
dozens or hundreds.
Yeah, so it's essentially dozens of courses are free for certification, but on Coursera we have over 4,000 courses. Any course is free to audit.
Right.
So anybody who signs up with Coursera, they can go audit any course for free. Only if they want to get a certificate, then they have to pay in general.
Got it.
What we've done is we've taken a subset of the collection of courses, and we said we make it even that free for certifications for a period of time.
Got it. Got it. And frankly, I mean, I'm an enrolled student. I have not completed 2 of the courses that I enrolled in. I admit, mea culpa. My wife, she's doing something on music and neuroscience, and she's finishing her courses. She's very diligent about it. She spends late nights working on that. And she's gonna get the certification. I didn't do it for certification. But certification is not that expensive, actually. So that's remarkable.
No, it's not. Actually, so 4 of us as family, we finished the most popular Python course, Python for Everybody, Programming for Everybody Using Python by University of Michigan, Dr. Chuck. Very popular professor as well. So I kind of a little bit forced the issue with the kids. But I said, let me learn. I needed something to energize myself. But also, it's also dog putting our own product, right? So once in a while, so we have to do that.
So my question about those high school courses was, how long are those courses? So if somebody did it diligently, sincerely, on an average, each of those courses takes how many hours of a high school student, especially those activity courses?
Yeah, great question. So generally speaking, a course, the content is set up for about 10 to 12 hours or something like that, right? The course is usually equivalent to about 1 credit hour, usually, if you want to map it to ultimately, specialization, which is about 3 courses, kind of maps into 1 credit hour, if you would, in a university parlance. But fundamentally, it's about I would say 10 to 12 hours generally a course, but depending on the subject matter, depending on the number of assessments and how long you're taking the time for the assessments, it could take longer or shorter. The Python course, for example, we all finished it in a week, where we spent about an hour a day or something, I would say. So,
that's quite doable.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad. So the intro level courses are generally easier to finish, and then so those would be in the 5, 6, 7 hour range, and then as you go up, they will take longer.
Yeah. So the second question I had was, because high school kids have not done a lot of online courses, even adults, most of the adults haven't, right? They're just getting to that now. Yeah. Is there a particular methodology they should use when they're doing online courses? Let's say they come on and they find, let's say somebody, we have a number of internships on our platform that kids will be applying for. One of them is grant writing, right? In fact, we talked about that earlier in the session today. Another one that they may be applying for are project management roles, marketing, or data science. Is there a technique or best practices that high school kids, especially high school kids, should follow to make sure they don't lose, interest, or they don't lose the momentum? I would love to hear your recommendation.
Sure. Yeah. So I listed out a URL on one of those slides with the 8 tips, and I'll just kind of read out some of those tips in essence. So fundamentally, though, I think, this generation is more online, accustomed to than even our generation in general. So they're definitely used to that. I think the key is, how do you just not distract yourself? And so when I think about that, you've got to, it's not any different from any other advice generally you give. Like, you've got to have daily goals for studying. And so what we do in the product, actually in the course, there is a goal setter tool. And you can actually say, I want to study Monday, Wednesday, Friday for like an hour. And it will at least help. And then it'll put it onto your calendar. And then you could at least have a reminder for yourself. A lot of us, we're busy. We got 1,000 things going on. So having sort of that mechanism to someone to remind us would be definitely helpful. So you got to start, but you got to start by setting the goal, and then some of this technology can help you keep to the goal. Creating a dedicated study space, I think it's what I feel like, when we did the course, we all just kind of sat in the same place in the same room, but having sort of in the same place, having a dedicated space at home, so you're not like walking around and going around, like you got like all these other distractions coming in, so it's not your bed or it's not your sofa, but actually a dedicated space. So just like any other, like I'm studying for an exam, right? So take it seriously is kind of how I would put it. And then keeping yourself accountable. So one of the ways to do that is tell others, what you're doing. So if you tell others, you're more motivated to actually finish it. Right. And so you could post your achievements too. So I got my kids the certification. It's actually pretty cool. Like, it's Coursera, but it's University of Michigan. I love it. Like, when we were growing up, there was no resource like this. And if you're getting a certificate from University of Michigan, Duke, Stanford, like, man, that's fantastic for you to be able to kind of build your profile or your college application resume, if you would, right? And so think of it that way as well. And then join the discussion. There are also discussion forums in those classes. So you're not alone at the end of the day. If you do have questions, you can post the questions, and you can get some additional help there. Doing one thing at a time. Our kids are enormous multitaskers, and good or bad. So I think, one thing I kind of, and we come from a generation like focus, and that's a constant fight inside the house. Like, you focus, and they're like, no, I can do 3 things at a time. I just don't know how much you get when you're trying to do 3 things, right? So doing one thing at a time, especially when you're trying to learn a subject, that's also a lot of these courses have been created by universities, right? University teaching staff and professors. They're not entirely designed for high school, in essence. The intro level are certainly a little bit more easier to kind of get in and do it. But so one thing it means that is it's going to be a little bit more advanced. It's going to push you a little bit more. And so if you can actually, be more focused, and then obviously take breaks, because the heart of the subject, and so Pomodoro technique, I think is great. I even bought a timer for my son who never uses it. But that's a timer I like, spend 15 minutes, and then you could see the clock going. We all think like digital and it works, but I think that mechanical clock is the greatest, the greatest inventions.
I think so. So one question, actually, I think it's a follow-up to what you just said. I think one of the things that people always worry about doing something new, a course or whatever, right? Any new thing, is this, not a fear of failure, but fear of, it's like, what if I don't do well? And that may be in some cases, it may demotivate people, and especially if they fall behind, it might demotivate. So how do you get out of that? Because, nobody's judging you. This is online learning, and you're just doing it for yourself. So any thoughts about that?
Yeah, great question. The best part about these courses is there are no some assessments or tests at the end being conducted by a school body or a teacher where you have to go in and kind of submit and then you get one chance to kind of get whatever grade or get through it. You can actually, they're sort of formative, and there is a summative assessment at the end, right? So formative assessments are quizzes typically, and those quizzes are easy to take, and then you can take as many times as you want. So the good news is a lot of times it actually points you back to, hey, this is what you're kind of missing if you want to go back and refresh, if you want to go back and learn. And so it's almost like, you know, the textbook with an index to go back into the chapter or the lesson material or the video material that you need to do. And then there's also notes. We have like a in-course notes feature. It's like a sticky notes anyway. So you can actually mark off notes as you're listening to the video. So anytime you feel like, hey, maybe I will have to refresh before I go to the summative assessment, just kind of bookmark those. And so there's no pressure really. There's no time pressure. These are not timed on top of it. So take your time, do it. If you fail, you go back. And if you actually don't understand something, you can search on the web. You can, you know, look up. There's no harm in doing any of that. Just don't cheat your way into answers, right? So you're not learning anything. But and then the summative assessment is also, if you want to get a certification, what happens is they get submitted and it's either auto-graded, machine-graded for certain, like, you know, programming and something like that, machine-graded, or it's peer review based. So there are community of members who are reviewing your submissions, and they actually give you feedback, and then you can go back and redo it again. Like, it's the same thing. So don't worry, take the course, take your time, do the quizzes, whatnot, and you'll get the certification.
You know, one thing that we've done in this entire program, Seva Internship program, is we're actually going through a kind of a systematically kind of helping the students think about what is it that they really want to explore. We're saying, don't have to decide what you want to do. Don't say, I want to be a doctor today, right? Yeah. Start to explore and understand the goal of this entire journey is to figure out who you are. What is it that you really, really enjoy, and what is you really want to be good at? So would you recommend, so for example, you know, there was one particular student who said, I'm interested in A, B, C, D, and E. There are 5 things. And some students said, I'm interested in these 2 things, right? So would you recommend that they, when they start on Coursera or a platform like that, that they should start with one thing and one topic and then just focus on that in the beginning? Or should they go in and do sample from different topic areas and kind of switch it around?
So try before you buy, kind of ultimately, you know, figure out pathways that you want to get onto and decide what's most exciting for you. There are a couple layers to this in my perspective. One is obviously, explore. There's no reason to kind of say, I want to commit myself to completing a course. You could go as far as you want and then say, oh, maybe data science, or maybe biology, maybe math, maybe logic, maybe computer science. You could try different intro courses. And if they're interesting, the good news is here, one of the big issues is, can I trust what I'm getting material-wise? Because that's when you're trying to judge. So if you're actually consuming content from high quality institutions by high quality, you know, reliable faculty that put these things together, they know what they're doing and they know what they're speaking, right? And so that's the trust you can have. So that's one. If you can trust that, then you can try multiple and then commit to maybe 1 or 2 and then kind of do that. The second thing I would also suggest any student to do is talk to people who are in those professions already also. And if you actually talk to them, you will probably get a sense of what is their day in the life of. Like, what do they do morning to evening? And then what was their journey a little bit? Like, how did they get started? Like, so did they start with introduction to this, or maybe some other subject, something? Sometimes, like, you have to go backwards to say, what is the foundational thing, right? And if I'm not interested in the foundational piece, then trying to get to sort of this advanced, like data science is advanced, machine learning is advanced. But if you are not interested in statistics, probability, statistical modeling, and that kind of stuff, you can be a data engineer, but not a data scientist, right? And so there's a difference in terms of how those things work. And you will only understand that by talking to a data scientist versus a data engineer.
Right. That's actually a great advice. Talk to folks in the field, professionals in the field, and get their perspective. And you know, it's an exploration. You're learning. You're journeying through it. So there's no wrong way to approach it. But I think by talking to folks, you can actually get a better range finding. So that's great. I mean, so I'm going to open it up to now the students, and I know I want to be respectful of your time, Shravan. So students, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you may have. I know you all are fairly engaged, and you've been asking some questions, and there have been others who've been responding on your behalf, by the way, because many of them have done courses on Coursera. So I was this thing about, I think you said something about this life something, right? There was one particular course that you mentioned earlier in the presentation, yes. And they said, oh, it was a really interesting, Science of Wellbeing. Science of Wellbeing, Manasi actually loved that one. And then Sachi asked this course at this point about some of the courses on AI are very advanced, the Stanford one, Andrew's course. And then the response from Som was that, no, there is a AI for everyone. So this is a hive mind right here. So, which is great. So students, please unmute yourselves. We have maybe 5, maybe up to 10 minutes to do a bit of a Q&A, and then we can wrap up the session. Yeah, go ahead and go. Do you want to just unmute yourself and ask, or do you want to type in? Totally up to you.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Manasi.
Hi, yeah, this is Mansi. So I had a question, I guess broadly about academic dishonesty. So I mean, online learning definitely lends itself to collaboration, and there's positives to that, but there's also, especially like some of my teachers, since we've shifted to online learning, have raised concerns about academic dishonesty and cheating through collaborating with others. Yeah. So what do you think about the cons to collaboration online, and like, how do you think, what are your thoughts around that as more schools shift to online learning?
Yeah, great question. I think, in fact, my daughter said her chemistry teacher, so she's a presentation, she's online, they do the online, and the chemistry teacher, and this is like the unfair part of it, I think, found someone cheated and said, I'm going to make this exam very hard for everybody, the next exam. And it was very hard for everybody. I'm like, that's no way to treat students. There's no way to kind of teach online or adapt. So I think in the higher ed space, there are tools. So in our online degree programs, we have full proctoring and full sort of, monitoring and ID verification. A lot of that exists. And so we can actually prevent cheating in the case of our degree programs, as an example. The issue is those technologies are expensive right now. And I think what's going to actually happen now is some sort of an acceleration between AI and a bunch of other models that is going to lead to solving these problems. With that said, until those problems are solved, but even if their problems are solved at a certain level, there's going to be a level of mistrust from certain parts of the community, especially. So I would say the broad solutions don't exist yet. And the encouragement I would give is, at the end of the day, these are high school tests, high school exams. There are some technology ways that you can detect, similar answers on the web that already exist. Even when they're doing homework evaluations, they're already using some of those techniques. So stick to those techniques, and I wouldn't say don't penalize the students unnecessarily at the end of the day at this point. And as the technology still has to evolve.
Yeah, and then I think what I would also add here is that there's a school system, there's an official sort of framing of these online courses where they're doing it in lieu of what was happening live. But the context of this particular session and context of this particular program is all about you learning, right? So the concept of honesty or cheating doesn't really arise here because you're only hurting yourself. There's nobody else checking on. So I think if you think about the shift of learning in that mode where it's really your knowledge that matters, not the grade that you got on some course, I think that would solve it. It's a longer evolving picture.
Yeah. Ultimately, this is unfortunate though. No matter how much you tell, like some are wanting to go for shortcuts because employers, as long as you feel like the credential is the most important thing in life, like that degree or the certificate is the most important thing in life, then it's a problem. I think knowledge and the learning and the ability to apply that learning is the most important thing. Then I think your attitude and the mindset will change.
Agreed. I mean, I started a new course at Stanford this year, this winter term in January. And my approach to that course was, these are graduate students, mostly some undergraduate students. And basically I said, all of you get an A unless you don't put in the effort and you don't learn. You don't show me that you have learned. Right. For me, that was far more important. If I turn that into an online course, which I'm actually planning to do global, and we should talk about that separately, Shravan. This will be a global course, just like Andrew's course. Yeah. And there, I would basically not care whether, whether they have cheated or not, because my goal is for them to learn. And so that's a great question, Manasi, but I'm hoping that at least for what we are trying to do here with the training, developing your skills for meaningful internships, hopefully that is.
Well, what you have identified as an opportunity for innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we end the session here? Any parting thoughts for the students, Shravan?
No, I think you've been a great audience. Appreciate all the comments that came through in the chat. Good luck, and I would love to see my kids as part of this group. So I'm gonna encourage them.
Great to have them. That'd be wonderful
to be part of this group. So, somebody had a quick question. Go ahead, ask.
Sanjana. Yeah, please, Sanjana, go ahead.
My question is, obviously some sort of skills, they can't be adapted as well into, online learning, because you're looking at like certain lab skills, you're looking at some certain practical skills or academic skills that you do need that sort of hands-on experience. So is there any, innovations that your company is doing in order to adapt to this? Because, this is a really unique situation that we're in where no one can really, interact and have that hands-on experience. But, it's definitely not probably going to be the last. This, this situation, what we realized.
It's a new normal.
Yeah. And, it could also have like a higher possibility of happening again. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, I had, Shravan, I'm very curious to hear that answer, partly because at Biodesign, we do prototyping and collaboration around new ideas, new concepts. So thanks for asking that question, Sanjana.
Yeah, it comes up a lot. So let me go back to my presentation, quick slide here. Share my screen. So you can see this here. Let's see. All right. It's loading. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I know about whiteboarding and all of that, but I think that's if you want to do 3D printing or prototyping of parts.
Let me just start talking, and if it comes up, it's great. There we go. Yeah. So, okay, maybe not in the presentation mode. I'll just leave it there. Yeah. So one to the point here is about how do I actually learn applied skills and applied learning in essence versus the theory. And a lot of times, obviously there's the labs. And so what we have done is we've launched what we call as Coursera Labs, which is largely obviously more from technology, projects and technology labs, assessments and those kinds of things. So that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is what we have is you have a lot of other technologies that you can plug in, right? AR, VR, all kinds of other ways that you can start incorporating those ways of doing experiments into online. And those can be easily dropped into a course through technology. We have a way to accept any other technology innovation that just gets dropped into the course. It's called LTI integration. But anyway, so anybody else, so we don't want to imagine every single way of the lab and simulations and things like that need to be done. We have done some out of the box, and that's number two. Number three is this technology, which is called Rhyme. We bought this company last year, and we now kind of launched it at scale. What this is essentially, it's every individual has a desktop in the cloud. So a full PC or machine in the cloud. And now that machine can have any software. And if you think of any of the labs, it can be built as a software simulation. Like, if you want to test an Android application, there's an Android simulator. If you want to test a 3D modeling, as part of a 3D modeling technology in teaching, you can have a 3D modeling software. So because it's a fully capable desktop, you can invoke any software, you can put any software on that cloud desktop, and every student gets a instance of that cloud desktop. And now they're engaging. That's one part of it. The other part of it is actually the professor, when they are creating the lab, they can actually use their software, and they can actually do the whole, like, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And that's what you see on the right. It gets recorded when they're authoring that. And for the student, which is on the left, when they start this project, when they open that and then they start the project, they can actually essentially go in sync with the professor, like step 1, step 2, step 3, as those videos progress, and it gets highlighted and zoomed into the appropriate areas. And then the professor can also live monitor the students. And so if a certain student is getting stuck, they can go in and they can take over the desktop, and they can actually say, okay, I see your problem here, and here's how you can actually fix this. And then they can also zoom out and look at the landscape of all of the kids that are doing it. So we're really excited about this technology. I think we're trying to scale this at a massive level, so that way we can support thousands of students at a time.
That's impressive. Can I ask a quick follow-up question? Do you imagine, or are you, if you can share that, that'll be great. Do you imagine in near future, there being physics lab kits, chemistry lab kits, or biology lab kits that are safe, that are designed for distance learning, online learning, that actually plugs into your platform? So not just for technology kind of learning, but learning that requires maybe laboratories, physics or chemistry, or a number of other kinds of labs that actually require more hands-on sort of mixing of things and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two main pieces to this. One is, I mentioned, I think the future is not just pure online learning, especially as it comes to students and campuses. It's going to be a blended learning model, right? And so there's going to be, those physical labs may not go away in general, but there could be a lot of it could be done online, and then you have to go to physically on campus at some point. Now, with that said, we actually are launching a master's in electrical engineering degree from University of Colorado sometime this year. And that has a lot of, circuits and electrical engineering models, right? And so they are they're building a lot of software simulators. And then they're also imagining you could literally buy off-the-shelf components, or they can ship off-the-shelf components. And then you could also do both through the simulator and with those components. And we're working with Imperial College Medical School, the number 5 in the world medical school, doing a lot of these blended learning models. And they're really testing out their MBBS program, the medicine degree program in this blended learning model. And so I think just like if I look at industries that went through a rapid, massive disruption, the print industry, the advertising industry, e-commerce now, there are these seminal moments that happen. I think e-commerce has had its seminal moment for the first wave was back in 2001, 2002 and all that. And I think the biggest seminal moment is shift is in the last couple months. It was under 13% or 14% of commerce was e-commerce, jumped to 27% or 26% in 2 months. And so that's going to accelerate the change and accelerate kind of how it's going to change. So I think for education, this is the seminal moment.
I agree. And in fact, I just wrote down an idea based on this discussion right here, big value of, I'm part of the Center for Global Health at Stanford. And we've been thinking about how do we serve the global community. And I was talking about the course that I wanted to take global. Yeah. And I'm going to talk to you about that, potentially using Coursera as a platform. I have not made a decision, but we should talk about it. But I'm actually wondering if there is an opportunity for us to create a global health technology, either a master's program or a certification program from Center for Global Health at Stanford. So that idea just came up based on what I was hearing. So that already, it's great value for me right here. Thank you so much. I think with this, I'm going to end the session because I know there may be more questions, but feel free to share those questions with me and I'll pass those on to Shravan, who's been very gracious to take his time on a Sunday on Mother's Day. Hopefully you'll do something for the mom.
Just put me in a hard spot right there. My mom, the mom is listening too. So.
Oh, wonderful.
Now I got to figure out something.
Ms. Gurley, I thank you for letting Shravan take this time. And but I tell you, it's all worth it. It's giving back to the mothers around the community. So thank you. And with that, we would end the session. And hopefully we'd love to have you back in future sessions as well, Shravan, because this has been very, very instructive for all.
Sure, happy to help anytime, whatever way I can. Appreciate the opportunity as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shravan. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all. Good luck.